author and former White House speechwriter, Mr. Jonathan Horn, on his book, The Fate of the Generals, MacArthur, Wainwright, and the Epic Battle for the Philippines. Good morning, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Good book. I love history so much.
Well, this is definitely history. It's a story that a lot of people don't know. Everybody knows that MacArthur made that famous vow at the beginning of World War II when he was ordered out of the Philippines, I shall return. But most people don't know there was another general who also made a vow, and his name was Jonathan Wainwright, and he vowed to stay even when it meant becoming the highest-ranking American prisoner of war of World War II.
Mm-hmm. You know, and people, why don't they teach this stuff? Do we just not have enough time? Is there not room in the curriculum? What do you think it is?
Well, I think there should be time because these are American heroes, and people need to hear these stories. And so often what ends up getting left out is military history.
Mm-hmm. Especially great leaders like this. I mean, if there's any discussion of World War II, this should be included.
Absolutely, and this is a story that has really gone untold. In fact, many Americans aren't even aware that the Philippines used to be a colony of America's, and it was in the Philippines that we had the largest surrender of American forces in history. That was at 80,000 troops at the beginning of World War II when the Bataan Peninsula surrendered to the Japanese. And, of course, MacArthur made that famous vow because he had been ordered out of the Philippines to go to Australia. And he said, I shall return, a vow he fulfilled in 1944.
Yeah. So while where did you get all the information for this book, though? Because, I mean, if we're not taught it and we don't know it, where did you get it?
You know, I found a really big break as a historian. There were boxes of Wainwright papers, diaries, letters, other personal documents that had been deposited in military archives in the more than 40 years that have passed since anyone had written a biography of Jonathan Wainwright. So no wonder he had been forgotten, but here was a great opportunity to tell his story where I think it belongs, side by side with the legendary Douglas MacArthur's.
And you get to know these guys kind of on a personal level because, like you said, you saw their writings and their diaries. They even wrote poems when they were at West Point. I mean, there were all sorts of things in this book that I wouldn't even have thought to look for. So how did you decide how to put this together? Because you speak of these people as real people, not just guys we heard of in history. You go at it from a humanity type writing, I guess.
I think that's a great point, and so often we forget that these great leaders are people. And when you read their diaries, especially in the letters they write to their wives, you see the interior of what they're thinking, and you see the toll making these very difficult decisions weighs on them. And in the case of Wainwright, he makes this diary entry on April 2nd, 1942, and in it he says, no matter what happens, I'm going to share the fate of my men in the Philippines. There would be no other honorable course of action. And that one page of his diary really sets the stage for all the ones that follow.
Well, and you know, it's the captain going down with the ship. I mean, it's a thing. It's the honorable thing. That's the way men used to think. Now it's like, I'm going to be the first one on the rescue boat. We've lost that fortitude in such a major percentage of the male population. We just don't. I mean, we still have it. Don't forget. Don't let me sway the fact that bravado is still there and should be, and masculinity is very sexy. But I'm just saying that there aren't a lot of guys like this anymore.
You know, and when Wainwright came home at the end of the war after having been tortured by the Japanese in prisons, he came home, he received the Medal of Honor from President Truman, he had a ticker tape parade in New York, and to your point, in the years since, his name really has been forgotten. And these are exactly the kind of ideals that we should be holding up as examples for our children, and the name Wainwright should be a household name.
Well, he's the hero of the book, in my opinion, don't you think?
I think he is a hero, and I think we needed both of these generals in 1942 in these very difficult days at the start of World War II. We needed General MacArthur to be able to fulfill our moral obligation to return to the Philippines after we had suffered that great defeat. And we needed General Wainwright to make that pledge to stay with his men, even when it meant facing this terrible, terrible ordeal that he went through.
We also needed a Jonathan Horn to dig enough so that we could get to know these guys a little bit better. So thank you for that, because when somebody does something this impactful on the formation of what the country is going to look like after a world war, it could have gone a lot differently. And we need to know the men who were stabilizing the United States. They were part of that.
Absolutely, and your point is a very good one, because they had no idea how these events were going to turn out at the time, and you can see that in the diary that Wainwright keeps. He doesn't know when World War II is going to end. He's in a prison in Manchuria. He's cut off from the news. Mm-hmm. He thinks he could go all the way into 1947.
Can you imagine? I mean, just imagine. You know, I worry about the Israeli hostages, and I know they're going through horrific things right now. And I don't mean to make it a synonym here, but it does relate. I mean, he was not treated well.
No, and being a prisoner of the Japanese was a very difficult thing, because the Japanese themselves during World War II didn't even believe in surrender. Yeah. And the American commanders found this out over and over again, that the Japanese would fight to the last man. So they had no respect when Americans surrendered, and observed none of the conventions of treating prisoners of war according to the Geneva Conventions.
Yeah, and every movie we've ever seen does not quite portray it that way. There might be a few, but when it comes right down to it, they were just very kamikaze death at any, I don't care if I die, but take as many people with me as I can.
Right, and so Wainwright, as a result, goes through what he calls systematic starvation very quickly. He was already a skinny guy. His nickname at West Point was Skinny, but that nickname became not so funny when he was a prisoner of the Japanese. Very quickly, his weight drops to 125 pounds.
Oh my
This
gosh.
is a 6'2" man, and so this is a terrible ordeal that he goes through.
Yeah. All right. So where's your book available?
Wherever books are sold, and at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and your local bookstore.
Okay, so you unearthed these records and these documents, and did you find them in an attic, a basement, a library? Where did you dig, or is that a secret? Should I even ask?
They're in government. They're in military archives. There's one. Wainwright's papers are split between two repositories. One is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and the other one is at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And they were deposited by the family. But so many years have passed since anyone cared to look, really, because it's been more than 40 years since a Wainwright biography has been written.
Crazy. Just crazy to me. And it's all just sitting right there for people to know. Because we want to focus on the ones that make people feel the best, right? We want to focus on those guys and make them the heroes instead of these guys who sailed. Can you imagine how long it took to get to where he had to go just to do battle and make the impact that he did during this war? Just crazy to me. All right, so you have the fate of the generals MacArthur, Wainwright, and the epic battle for the Philippines. To be honest with you, I don't think a lot of people even know that there was a battle for the Philippines.
I think that's right, and people don't realize that the Philippines was a colony of the United States. It was our outpost, in a sense, in the Pacific Ocean. And we knew, though, if in the event of war with the Japanese, it would be very difficult to defend this, because if you just look at the geography, it is so much closer to Japan than it is to American reinforcements in Hawaii and California. And, of course, after Pearl Harbor, it became almost impossible to defend this position. And that's why you have this massive surrender on April 9th, 1942, of nearly 80,000 United States forces to the Japanese.
Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people are trying to present some of these wars that happened in the past as us being imperialists, as us being the bad guys who went too far with the way we beat down the enemy. When I read your book, I felt proud. I didn't feel ashamed. I felt proud that we had men who would go to such lengths to ensure not only the safety of their men, but to go to the goalpost, to go all the way with it. and never give up. And I think that says a lot about the Army, and the difference that we have today is absolutely, there is no gray area now. It's black or white. But these stories are dramatic and truthful and honest and raw, and people should know them.
Absolutely. Anyone who feels like they should feel ashamed of American history should remember that the Filipinos proudly fought with the Americans in World War II because they were also trying to resist the Japanese, and they also suffered with the Americans in this battle. We were fighting together, and the Philippines was a part of the United States at that time.
Yeah. So as a POW, you always kind of have the feeling you're not going to get out, don't you?
You have no idea what's going to happen, but the other thing that's going through Wainwright's mind when he is a prisoner of war is he thinks Americans aren't going to understand the decision that he made to surrender for the sake of his men, because he's tortured by this thought of how he'll be received when he gets back home. And that's one of the wonderful things that happens, is that when he does get home, he is received as a hero. He receives a ticker tape parade in New York. Yep. And he has this dramatic meeting with President Truman where he is awarded our nation's highest military honor, the Medal of Honor.
That's so cool. All right. So why did you pick this particular part of history to write about, Jonathan?
Well, because I think this is a story, and the name Wainwright should be as well known as the name MacArthur. So many of us have heard those famous words, I shall return. That's MacArthur's vow. Uh-huh. I want Wainwright's vow that I'm going to stay with my men no matter the cost, to be just as famous. These are two important stories that belong together in the same book, and that's what I've tried to do.
Well, and I don't even know the answer to this, but is he still the highest-ranking American soldier that was ever imprisoned?
He was certainly the highest-ranking during World War II. He was a lieutenant general when he was taken prisoner. You can sort of think this isn't sort of an unfathomable thought in this day and age, of course, but Wainwright was part of a tradition of what's called the fighting generals. He was constantly at the front with his men on Bataan and then on Corregidor, which is a nearby island off the coast of the Bataan Peninsula, and he shared in the dangers with his men. That's just the way he was. He had to be at the front, or he felt nervous that he wasn't sharing the fate of his soldiers.
Well, and if you want to hear the dramatic escape of MacArthur and how he got out of there, I mean, it's all in this book, and there's so much in here that not only did I not know, I never would have dreamt of thinking. So it's a great history lesson. We've got a lot of history lovers who listen to this program, and they're going to be calling like crazy because I'm going to give away a copy of your book. But Jonathan, anything you want to add about your book or yourself?
Well, I think people, there's so many stories about American history that Americans don't know today, and I hope that everyone will take an interest in learning more about these great heroes of World War II.
And it's not your only one. You also have The Man Who Would Not Be Washington, which I have not read yet. So, I feel like I need to read that one, too, because you have a way with words. I'll leave it at that. Jonathan Horn is the author. He's a former White House speechwriter. It's called The Fate of the Generals, MacArthur, Wainwright, and the Epic Battle for the Philippines, available at Amazon, and every good bookstore should have a copy. Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having me today.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.